I'd like to tell you the story of how I started the business because it's an entertaining story, but more importantly, I'd like to share with you, I had to think, I'm going to share so many minutes with these people, so I picked out what I think to be the 5 most important things I learned in building my business. And then if you want to know anything more, that's okay, but that's all the time we have today, okay? So I would start by saying that I really had a background that was perfect for becoming an entrepreneur. I grew up in a town called Edgewater, which probably most of you are familiar with, right under the George Washington Bridge, across from the river. And at the time we lived there, we lived in a 2-bedroom house, and we had 6 girls in the girls' room that my mother labeled the girls' room, and 4 boys in the boys' room. And then my mother and father, who were very devout Catholics, produced those 10 children from the living room sofa in the middle between the 2 rooms. What a romantic life they must have had, right? But I had a very special situation in that I had a mother who was an amazingly powerful role model. She was a mother of 10, and I believe that if she had ever been in business, not that that was the right thing for her, I think she was doing what she was supposed to be doing, raising her kids. But she would have been a tremendous success because we saw in her household all the traits that I think most entrepreneurs need to build a big business. My mother, number 1, had the most kids in all of Edgewater, but she was also the most organized mother. So in our little tiny house, she had 2 drawers in the kitchen, which she labeled with labels before labels were produced by Emery. She wrote them and glued them. And it was called the girls' sock drawer and the boys' sock drawer. The boys had all navy blue socks, not made at all one size. And the girls' sock drawer had all white socks, all one size. So in the morning when you're getting 10 kids out, I give this to you as an illustration of the way her mind thought. 10 kids getting out for school in the morning at the same moment, you could just reach in, whether you're a girl or boy, the right sock drawer, which was easy, pull out any 2, and they always matched. And so we had that efficiency in the way she ran the whole household. So when we grew up as grown-ups, that sounded good, but when we grew up, we automatically kind of had an inner gene of how to organize things. And you can imagine after you have more than one person in a company how important the organizational gene is. And we kind of just learned it by living with my mother. I think I maybe was 8 or 9 before I realized every kid at school didn't have that white bump in the back of their ankle because we were always growing into the sock because they were in the largest size. My mother also was a tremendous motivator, and it took me many years before I realized that she was really a great delegator by being a good motivator. And so we grew up under her wing, and she would decide on the birth of each of her 10 children, the day they were born, it seemed, she'd decide what she thought their unique gift was. And more importantly than making that decision, she would constantly tell each kid what she thought they were great at. And so if you think about the efficiency of running a bunch of kids, she chose as a mom to focus on the positive. And frankly, she ignored the negatives in the household. Not that we didn't have all the same problems every other household had. But for example, my brother Eddie, the 3rd oldest in the family, he was hyperactive and constantly looking for trouble. He was just one of these kids like hell on wheels, really. And my mother would constantly shout to him, "Eddie, you're a born leader. All the boys are watching you." And he would rise to the occasion again and again. For my gay brother T, for example, she said, "You're a phenomenal dancer," just because naturally from the day he was born, he ran around in my mother's shoes up on his toes. But he was graceful and jumped and leapt, and he grew up to be a ballet dancer. For me, she told me I had a wonderful imagination, and she'd have me put the shows on in the rainy days down in the basement and open the rock stores in the backyard and entertain the whole neighborhood. But she said, "Oh, just go with Barbara. She has a wonderful imagination." So we as grown-ups now wonder whether we had any of the things she assigned to us and whether we were really that person, or by her repetitiveness we got to believe we were that person and rise to the occasion. But the truth of the matter is, other than my brother T, who is now a caterer and quit the ballet field, she was dead on 9 out of 10 of the kids. So we learned from my mother the power and the efficiency of underlining the positive. And so when I got into my little company, it was very easy for me to interview someone who was looking for a bookkeeping job and see the different thing that they had that they'd be better at, or see a salesman who thought they were going to be great at sales when I knew they were going to fail, and put them in the advertising department, because I could always see the talent in someone just by sitting and interview with them. And think of what an enormous advantage that had as a young entrepreneur. Anyway, Ray gave me the $1,000 to start my business. He took 51% of the shares. We issued stock. It was a corporation. And he said that he deserved the 51% because, after all, it is his money. So he gave me the money, the financial partner. I worked the business. We grew the company. We were maybe 25th in our marketplace, even though you couldn't count when you were down that low. But the fact of the matter is we had 12 salespeople. I had lived with him for almost 7 years. We had a thriving, I was making a living, a thriving business of 12 salespeople in a great city like New York, taking home a paycheck every week. And then one day, about 7 years later, he came home as I was dumping the pasta into it's like freezes in my mind. And he said, "Barbara, we have something serious to discuss." "Yes, Ray?" He said, "Barbara," he said, "I'm going to marry your secretary." And that was Tina. Well, see, the women in the room go, "Ew, you hate Tina already, right?" I loved her right before he said it. She was a great secretary. That moment, I hated her guts, all right? He told me I should take my time moving out, and I took about a minute, packed whatever I could, and moved in with my best friend in her studio until I could get myself situated. But on the way out the door, I thought to myself, I'll never recover from this. And I think just the thought of not recovering from it put me in such a depression. I don't think I was ever depressed in my life, and I now have great empathy for depression. But I couldn't get up in the morning. I went in to, confront Tina and Ray. It was like watching the love story in action, kissing, loving. I hated them both. And I was supposed to be happy and cheer the salespeople on and rent my apartments and all the things I usually did, but I was like a sheet without color, you know what I mean? Walking around, I felt like I didn't have a heart in me. And I did that. I can't believe, I'm embarrassed to admit, 2 whole years before one day it just clicked, and I don't think anything in particular made it click, but I just clicked one day and said, you know what? I am not going to do this anymore. And I went and announced to Ray that I was ending the partnership. We'd divide the money. We had almost $7,000. We divided it. I said, we'll divide the salespeople, and we divvied up the business like a football draw. He picked the first salesperson, I picked the second, he picked the third, and we went right down the line. Then he picked to stay in the space. I picked, the only thing left, I had to go. He picked to keep the old phone number. I picked to get a new phone number. And I was leaving the office that day, all right, looking for space. My salespeople could stay for another 2 weeks. Then, as I'm walking out the door, he said, "Oh, Barbara," you think I'd learned by now, "Oh, Barbara is never a good sign." "Oh, yes, Ray," stupid me said. And he said, "You know, Barbara, you'll never succeed without me." And I just stood there that moment, and I thought I would rather drop dead, die, and be drawn and quartered than him watch me not succeed. I had that passion in me, the ultimate insult. And so I thought to myself, I'll succeed. I did succeed, obviously. I wouldn't have been invited to speak here. Nobody wants to hear from somebody how I failed at everything I did, okay? I did succeed. I ran that business, the Corcoran Group, the new Corcoran Group, and I ran the business for almost 19 years and then sold it 5 years ago for $66 million cash. And so, thank you. I already spent that money.